Hey, you can bring the jury. Hello. There's our witness. You can come back. Welcome back. Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Sergeant.
Mr. Savage?
You're dressed today, or you're still working as North Charleston police officer, sergeant?
Yes, I have to.
Off-duty, so wearing civilian clothing.
Yes, sir, I'm on, I was injured at the beginning of the year, so I'm on light duty status.
And thank you, sir.
Well, sir.
On April 4th of 2015, you were a sergeant covering 2 bureaus, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Let's take a look at the outline of bureaus that day. It's on Defense Exhibit number 4, I believe. And your responsibility as a supervisor on the morning of April 4th covered the blue and red areas. Is that correct? Can you see it?
Oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Is there a monitor in front of you? I'm not sure whether that's...
There's not a map in front of me of that, no, sir.
The monitor, there's...
It's not up, no, sir. But that is correct. The Central Bureau is outlined in red, and the Southern Bureau is outlined in blue.
And in terms of management responsibility, you had both red and blue that day.
Yes, sir, I was responsible for putting the team on the street that morning. Myself and Sergeant Lawrence split the Central Bureau around about Aviation or Midland Park. Just depends on whoever was closer to wherever a supervisor was needed.
And Aviation would have been south? Is that
North.
correct?
It would have been west of the incident location, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So when the incident took place, were you the supervisor responsible for that geographical area?
Yes, sir.
And as I understood it, you were monitoring the communications that morning, and you heard through the communications that a traffic stop was initiated by Officer Slager.
That is correct, sir.
And at that time, you were involved in the traffic stop yourself.
That is correct, sir.
Now, if we can look at the Defendant's Exhibit Number 5. That morning, do you have a copy of that?
No, sir. I can see it, though.
Would it be fair to say that that morning both Officers Habersham and Officer Slager had responsibility for Zone 4, the Brown area?
Actually, sir, Officer Habersham was initially assigned 6, and Slager was assigned 4.
And was that unusual that morning, or was Habersham moved from 4 to 6 for a particular reason?
We were short that day, sir, so we had to divide up the zones.
And that day when the incident happened, neither Habersham nor the other officer who was working, named Baines, was in their regular patrol area.
No, sir. Officer Banez was dispatched to a call. I don't recall the call itself. And Officer Habersham was en route to the Central Bureau to pick up a warrant from records to serve at the jail.
And do you know anything about the warrant, or?
No, sir. They didn't disclose what the warrant was.
Do different warrants have different urgencies in terms of serving them?
If the subject was actually incarcerated, so there was no sense of urgency to serve it immediately, but he was just the officer dispatched at the time.
And the type of warrant, whether it's for a simple possession of marijuana or a crime of violence, would that change the urgency?
Are you talking about an arrest warrant or a bench warrant?
A bench warrant or an arrest warrant, are there differences in terms of urgency?
Not really, sir. I mean, there are warrant that has to be served, and if a subject's being detained somewhere by another officer, then when we have to get it to that officer, if another agency had a warrant that we have to pick the individual up from, might be where you're going with that.
I'm just asking because the jury's not familiar with police procedure.
Yes, sir.
And as far as Officer Banos goes that morning, do you know what he was doing at the time of this incident?
I don't recall, sir.
Now, you didn't direct either Officer Banos or Officer Habersham to do what they were engaged in doing at the time of this incident, did you?
No, sir.
Those assignments were made by Consolidated Dispatch.
That is correct, sir.
And their determinations of how to use the resources of the police department was done without consultation with you or Lieutenant Bowman that morning.
That's correct, sir. If a call comes in, they would dispatch the first available unit.
And those calls, the priority that was utilized perhaps wouldn't be the same priority that would have been utilized by a supervisor on the street.
I don't understand the question, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, knowing what you knew that morning at 9:25 and the availability of resources, perhaps a supervisor on the street wouldn't have agreed with the call that was made to pick up an iPad or to deliver to an incarcerated individual eventually. Isn't that correct?
Can you please state that in a question?
Given the knowledge on the street, that is you and other sergeants, as opposed to somebody who's essentially a clerk, a dispatcher at Consolidated, you'd be more familiar on the street with the criteria for what's urgent, what's not as urgent, what can wait till Monday. Is that correct?
As far as dispatch calls go, I have no, other than I can supersede a call if there was a call waiting in the pending queue that was more important, I could have the officer go to that call. That's the only authority I have over calls.
Well, that morning when you heard that there was a traffic stop, you were engaged in other activity for a traffic stop.
Yes, sir.
Could you show us with using the pointer that should be where the incident site was, where the Slager stop was, if you will, and where your stop was, so that we can get an idea of distances.
It's a little difficult because there's no road signs and it's a spread out, but I was in this general vicinity here, right in here, and the incident location.
Do you see immediately adjacent to blue I-26?
Yes, so this is I-26 right here.
All right, and do you see 526?
Okay, that's 526.
And judging from that intersection, could you tell us about where this incident site is?
The incident site should be in this general area, right here.
Just east of the airport, is that correct?
That's correct.
Would you show the members of the jury where the airport is located? A little bit up in the red.
Yeah, right here.
So those are the runways.
That looks like the executive park.
I'm sorry, that looks like,
Executive park. It's difficult to tell on that map.
Now, when you were, I'm sorry, you see, thank you. When you heard the radio communication of the traffic stop by Slager, that did not disrupt what you were doing at that time.
Not the basic traffic stop, no, sir.
And subsequent to that, a little over 3 minutes later, you heard a 10-8 police talk 10-8.
Yes, sir.
And what 10-8 meant to you was that there was a chase.
Correct, sir.
And in the police world, chases can be of different types, is that correct?
Yes, vehicle, foot pursuit.
And a vehicle chase, had this been a vehicle chase, you would have taken control of the decision-making with respect to go, no-go on a vehicle chase.
Yes, sir. I had the discretion I would have had the discretion to terminate it. Correct, sir.
So you have different criteria that you receive in training on a vehicle chase, location, traffic, weather. I guess there's some other criteria that you use in making a decision, go or no go.
Correct, sir.
And you can break off a chase if you think that it's inappropriate.
Correct, sir.
And there is a policy in North Charleston that dictates those criteria that a sergeant would use.
Correct, sir.
Now, another type of chase would be a foot chase.
Correct, sir.
In North Charleston, there is no criteria, there's no lesson plan, there's no training, there's no criteria for a patrolman or their sergeant to use on a go and no-go basis. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the patrolmen who are engaged by North Charleston in a foot chase, the go or no-go is discretionary on their part.
Correct, sir.
And there is no training about that in North Charleston. Is that correct?
None to my knowledge. I don't recall any specific training at this time, sir.
So any decision that's made on a go, no-go on a foot chase is by policy the discretion of the officer involved in the foot chase.
Yes, sir.
Now, you, this morning, in your testimony with Mr. Duran, you saw State's Exhibit number 3 and State's Exhibit number 2. State's Exhibit number 2 would have been the video of you responding to the incident site. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you on your video As you traveled to the incident site, you were traveling in an urgent manner.
Yes, sir.
Because when somebody says, a patrolman, whether they're under your supervision or anybody else's, they say they're on a 1080, that elevates the status to a high priority to an urgent situation.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? So if we can look at a shot or two from your video, we can see you traveling north on Rivers Avenue near the railroad tracks, 526 Railroad Track Avenue on Rivers Avenue. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And by looking at this video, we can tell the urgency. Excuse me, is that the original?
Yeah, that's Rivers.
Excuse me, that's not the original video. The original video would have your speed on it, would it not?
I don't know, you took it down, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see the markers on it. Nope.
Thank you, Corporal. States 2? Correct. No, what they're looking for, here we go. So Sergeant Gann, this is you approaching the U-turn to make a, excuse me, post. 1040 is way out. Okay, so forget that. We will. If the jury was given an opportunity to look at the, can we hold off on all this, please? Okay. Thank you. Too many distractions, so let's talk about this.
Okay, sir.
You were on your way to the incident site. You responded in an urgent manner. Is that
Yes, sir.
the reaching speeds of close to 100 miles an hour, 95 miles an hour on Rivers Avenue that morning.
I would assume, yes, sir, I was at an elevated.
You knew, based on the 1080, the foot chase, that it was an urgent response.
I don't believe I hit 100 miles an hour or up that until I heard shots fired.
In responding, you know what the weather conditions were.
Misty rain.
And so when we look at what has been shown to the jury earlier on State's Exhibit Number 2, when your car was stationary at the incident site, put that up. Just where it's stationary at. So, are you familiar with this snapshot of the video?
I couldn't tell you if that was my vehicle or Sergeant Webb's vehicle without the markers.
But that's the video, that's the shot that was in the courtroom this morning, is that correct?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And at that time, you identified that as your vehicle, is that correct? The point of it being, what makes the image blurry?
It's the rain. It's scattered showers, misty rain most of the morning.
And on Sergeant Webb's, excuse me, on Sergeant Webb's camera, which would be State's Exhibit Number 3, in a stationary location, looking at your vehicle, the same rain, if you will, at this time, was on your windshield. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is there any reason to believe that between your vehicle and Sergeant Webb's vehicle, it was not raining at the incident site?
It was sporadic, sir. It was like scattered showers.
And in fact, there was some protection put up over portions of the crime scene to protect it from the rain that night.
Correct, sir.
Now, when you approached that morning in your vehicle, you had indicated that you had gone east of the yellow brick road, the incident site, and came back in a westerly direction on the yellow brick road. Is that correct?
No, sir. When I entered, I came into the park, and then I went off to the side of the road.
Do we have a map of the- Okay, so let's look at, what number is that, please? 10. Defense exhibit number 10, does that give an overview of the incident site?
Yes, sir.
And so if you would show the jury with your pointer where you entered Yellow Brick Road.
Again, I came down the alleyway, or this road here, took a left, entered here, noticed some debris in the roadway, so I drove along the side of the road all the way up to where Officer Habersham and Officer Slager were.
And that's reflected in the video.
It should be, yes, sir.
In-car camera video, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the video that you saw in the road later turned out to be evidence in this case. Is that correct?
The items in the road, yes, sir, it was a hat, a watch, and I believe a wallet.
So State's Exhibit number 74 would show that, if we could put 74 up, please.
Yes, sir.
So the jury can see where your car is. We had seen an earlier photograph taken from your car looking at Sergeant Webb's car with rain on the windshield. And in State's Exhibit 74 that you're looking at now, you had indicated earlier where that debris was. If you would again use your pointer and point that out.
The hat, the watch, and the wallet.
And if you would tell the jurors where they were located in comparison to a particular spot on your patrol vehicle.
Passenger side of my vehicle, rear tire, they were almost parallel.
And could you show us where I thought you said that you saw some evidence where the shooting took place?
These markers here were laid out by Sergeant Webb, shell casings and whatnot.
And where are those in juxtaposition to your vehicle?
In between, I'm almost directly across from my front passenger door.
Thanks. Now, do you know when this particular photograph was taken in terms of the sequence of the crime scene investigation?
I do not, sir.
Were you present when they were taken?
No, sir. I wasn't with the photographer at the time.
Did you ever get to see up close the hat, the watch, and the wallet?
When we marked it, sir. Yes, sir.
And were they wet?
I do not recall if they were wet or not.
But it was raining that night,
Sporadically, yes, sir.
and the windshield was covered with rain.
This photo was taken well after, because my trunk is shut now. So I don't know what time this photo was taken.
And the wallet and the watch, did you get to look at the watch?
Yes, sir. It was on the ground.
It was busted up, wasn't it?
I don't recall right now, sir.
And the fact that it was busted up was hard to see when you looked at it because the broken part of it was on the bottom. Isn't that correct?
I don't recall the position of the watch at this time.
And the watch and the wallet were an inch or two apart.
They were in close proximity to each other, yes, sir.
It looked like somebody had staged the location of the watch and wallet?
Not to me, sir. I mean, that's just the way we found it.
Did it look to you like somebody who had been in a fight and who lost their watch and wallet in the course of the fight would have lost them both at the same location?
I really don't know if I can answer that, sir.
Well, from human experience, not from the police training experience that you've had, if you and I were engaged in a fight, and as a result of that fight I lost my watch, was it peculiar that the wallet was in the exact same location?
I didn't find it peculiar. I just figured he might have dropped it when he ran.
With your respect to your position as a training Taser, what did you say, master?
Yes, sir.
Is a Taser master a master of instruction? Is that what that refers to?
Yes, sir.
So that you have the ability to instruct other police officers to become instructors?
Correct, sir.
And that is what differentiates you from a regular instructor?
Correct, sir. I'm able to train the trainer and also can train the end user, which would be a police officer.
And in that capacity, did you have an opportunity to train Officer Slager?
I don't recall the last time he was in one of my training classes for Taser. The possibilities are good that he probably has been in one of my classes.
And do you recall that he was in your training classes at some time?
Yes, sir. In firearms or defensive tactics of some sort of training.
And do you recall that he had any difficulty in your training classes? What type of a student, if you will, was he?
Proficient. Proficient, and he participated. Didn't have any problems with it.
And in those classes you taught continuum of force. We've heard that expression, continuum of force.
Yes, sir.
Does that relate to the actions of a patrolman or a police officer? Continuum of force, does that address what a patrolman is authorized to do?
Yes, sir. It outlines.
Is there another phrase or expression that you use for what a suspect does, or somebody whose the use of force is being used against them?
Just went blank.
That's
Just it's suspect's reaction.
But without using the name, doesn't.
Yes, sir. There is a.
But it doesn't.
Yes, sir.
So what matters is the actions of the parties involved. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct? And the continuum of force is balanced with the reaction of the person who the force is used against.
Correct, sir.
If you would just think for a minute, I don't want to surprise you, but the continuum of force, I'll start out with it, is presence. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And presence is the physical appearance, the uniform, the nonverbal communication, the fact that I see somebody and I say, that's a police officer.
Correct, sir.
And the second continuum of force would be
Verbal.
stop.
Correct, sir.
That's level 2. And the use of level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 is based on the reaction to the continuum. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And in your training and instruction, both at the academy and what you offered at the police department, that the police officer is instructed and told to always stay one level above the reaction of the person who is being used against. Is that correct?
Correct, sir. +1.
So if somebody does not respond to stop, or what if somebody doesn't respond to that verbal command to stop, what is the next level of force that a police officer is instructed to use?
You have a couple options. You have your empty hand control, and then you have a use of an intermediate weapon, OC, or Taser.
So level 3, you said you're able to use hand control,
Correct, sir?
and police officers are taught different hand control techniques
Yes, sir.
that typically would elicit a response of, "Uncle, I've had it," in compliance. The ultimate goal is compliance.
Correct, sir.
Now, part of that level 3 force would be the use of OC spray, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
And OC spray can be pepper gas or something which would debilitate the vision of somebody that's being apprehended.
Correct, sir. Most common term would be the pepper spray that we use, and it's just a, common terminology, it's pepper spray.
And pepper spray works best when the wind isn't blowing, correct?
Correct, sir.
And pepper spray works best when you're not physically engaged with somebody, is that correct?
Not necessarily. You can be in close contact with somebody.
And in close contact, first of all, with the wind blowing, it disperses, correct? It's not effective.
Our version comes in a stream, so it's a little bit more effective in outdoor situations than the pepper foam or the mist. Yes.
And in close contact, the pepper spray, the debilitating factor is indiscriminate, so that anybody who's in close proximity would have the same tearing eyes and whatnot.
The version that we carry, sir, is stream, so it has to actually get on you. It's not like the old mist used to be and float through the air. It doesn't have the same effect.
And the taser, the use of the taser is at the same level. Is that
Correct, sir. It was at that time, yes, sir.
And the officers are given instructions to use what they believe is the most effective means at that given time. Isn't that correct?
Correct, sir.
So the use of a taser is not nor discouraged or told not to use the taser in a level 3 force encounter. Is that correct?
Could you please restate?
A level 3 force encounter.
Yes, sir.
Level 3 on the continuum of force encounter. A taser is proper. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, when somebody does not respond to a level 3 force, where does one go from there?
You can reassess, reapply, or take it to the next level.
And what is the next level?
That's your hard empty hand control, baton, weapons of opportunity.
In North Charleston Police Department's procedure and policy in effect on April 4th, 2015, officers were not instructed to carry a baton if they have a taser. Is that correct?
That is correct. They were given the option not to carry a baton.
So, in that elevation of force, the procedure employed by Officer Slager was in accordance with the instructions that you provided to all patrol officers in North Charleston. Isn't that correct?
Up to which point, sir? Up to level 4?
4 force.
Yes, sir.
Now, in your instructions as a master taser instructor, is a taser considered a weapon?
Yes, sir.
And if the weapon, the taser weapon, gets into the wrong hands, whether it has probes or whether it's in drive stun?
Drive stud.
Drive what?
Drive stun. Drive, D-R-I-V-E.
Drive stun mode, it can be used to disable a police officer and allow the person who's disabled the police officer to obtain a lethal weapon. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So even in the drive stun mode, drive stun, is that correct?
Drive stun, yes, sir.
So if somebody has a taser that doesn't have the shooting capability, that taser in drive stun, if it's used against an officer who has a lethal weapon, could disable that officer so that the lethal weapon could be taken away.
It won't reach NMI, which is neuromuscular incapacitation, which is full effect, but it can be used against the officer, yes, sir.
And if that taser in drive stun mode is used in the neck area,
Yes, sir.
it can be totally disabling
Yes,
to
sir.
the person, right?
Yes, sir.
So,
I agree.
The argument about it being just a little pain compliance depends on where the drive stun is employed.
Correct, sir.
And there are sensitive parts of the body besides the neck that it could be deployed to completely discombobulate the person who's being stunned. Is that correct?
Yes and no, because the growing area, it's more of when you apply the drive stun, you can damage something.
But you can actually drive stun somebody on the leg, and they could have a reaction in other parts of their body. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, it's called a three-point hookup, but a barb would have to be some barb or a wire would have to be somewhere else to complete the circuit.
Now, when you saw the video, did you see when the two parties involved, Officer Slager and Mr. Scott, when they got off the ground, that Officer Slager was wrapped in the taser wire?
I did not see that, sir. The video wasn't that clear.
Did they show you any photographs taken from the video that would show that when Mr. Scott ran away, the taser wire that was wrapped around Officer Slager pulled tight?
No, sir, I don't recall that. I don't remember seeing.
How many times have you met with prosecutors, agents, SLED personnel?
The initial interview, and I think 3 subsequent interviews.
And did they show you the video?
Yes, sir, they did, but I do not recall seeing the wire.
Did they show you a snapshot of when they stood up?
Yes, sir.
Did they show you a snapshot of the firing of the weapon?
They didn't show me any still photos, they showed me the video.
Now, if Officer Slager was wrapped in the wires from the taser, if he was wrapped in the wires from the taser, what would that mean?
If the wire was wrapped around him and he followed up with a drive stun, is that the question?
No, I'm asking you what just seeing the photograph of Officer Slager wrapped in taser wire would indicate to you.
If he was wrapped with taser wire and the cartridge was still in the taser, it could possibly render him, it would possibly give him NMI, which is neuromuscular incapacitation, full effect.
And in your testimony this morning, you were asked what was found about Mr. Scott when you got there.
Yes, sir.
And you indicated that there was a cartridge. A question. Did you indicate there was a cartridge by Mr. Scott?
There was one in close proximity to Mr.
Is
Scott.
there any way possible that that cartridge could have gotten there, other than it was entangled in Mr. Scott?
If he had the probes in him, or it was entangled with Mr. Scott, it could have dislodged from the taser itself.
Is there any explanation how a cartridge could have gotten near where Mr. Scott finally was found?
Yes, sir. I mean, if the wires were still connected to the cartridge, he could have drug it over there when he fled. Yes, sir.
And those wires may have been, you just haven't seen the video of where the wires were.
I have not seen, I don't recall seeing any of the wires at this time. Excuse me, sorry. Pardon me a second. Sorry.
Now, when you saw Officer Slager that day, have you been familiar with him, observed him on other occasions?
Yes, sir. I've had interactions with Officer Slager several times.
Have you ever known him to be in any way discriminatory against any of the population in North Charleston,
No, sir. I've never seen him act that way in front of anybody.
or in conversations about life, any conversation, not just about police matters, in any way indicated any type of animus towards any segment of the population?
No, sir. He's always been even keeled around me.
And when you saw him that morning, I think the words that you used were that he appeared to be in disbelief and in shock. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in your words describing him that morning, you said there was no anger or frustration, that he was calm to the extent that he appeared to be in shock.
Yes, sir.
In the ensuing weeks and months that followed this incident, were you responsible for the custody of Officer Slager's patrol unit?
His vehicle?
Yes.
No, sir.
Did you sign the authorization for the removal of the patrol unit to SLED?
No, sir.
Do you know when that was done?
No, sir, I do not.
Do you know whether on April 4th, 2015, Officer Slager had any lethal weapons in his vehicle? Do you know on April 4th, 2015, in the vehicle that was left at the Advanced Auto Store parking lot, there were any lethal weapons in that vehicle?
Not to my knowledge, sir. The only weapon that he should have had was his firearm.
There was no rifle in his car, there was no shotgun in his car.
I don't recall if he was certified patrol rifle or not.
Beg the court's indulgence, one minute, please.
Go right.
Just have a couple of questions. Sorry. You had indicated on cross-examination that there is no policy regarding, or you don't intervene in foot chases as opposed to like a vehicle chase. The decision to go or no go is the decision of the individual officer involved. Is that correct? To chase
Yes, sir.
or not to chase?
Yes, sir. You were aware that when Officer Slager stopped this car, he stopped it for a tailgate, correct? Equipment violations, what I heard.
You were aware that he had the driver's license?
I was not aware that he had the driver's license at the time of the foot chase.
I believe you said when you were repeating this statement to the court that he had gotten the driver's license and
Oh.
went in to check the information.
Correct. At the time of the initial radio transmissions, what I thought you were talking about, pardon me. Yes, he told us that he had the driver's license and everything then.
And he had the driver's car,
Correct, sir.
and he had a passenger in the driver's car,
Correct, sir.
and he left his car running, his cruiser running, correct?
I would assume so, yes, sir.
And left all that behind him to chase somebody for a takeoff.
Correct, sir.
A little bit about Glocks. Glock 45 is what y'all use as a service weapon, correct?
Correct, sir.
And as a general rule, how do shell casings eject from a Glock 45?
Correct, sir.
How do they eject? What direction?
They usually shoot out, eject through the right side unless you do have the left-handed one. We do have a few of those in our service.
And as a general rule, up and to the right.
Up and to the right, yes, sir.
Do you recall having previously testified before a grand jury and telling the grand jury that Officer Slager, the incident involving Officer Slager was not what he was trained to do as a North Charleston police officer?
Okay, the objection is sustained.
And you have seen the video, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was this conduct as you trained?
Can you rephrase, please?
Was he trained by North Charleston Police Department to shoot somebody in the back as they were running away?
No, sir.
Is it true that y'all trained de-escalation?
Yes.
And what do you mean by de-escalation?
To reassess the situation to determine the proper use of force needed to effect the arrest.
And if a suspect de-escalates, what is the officer supposed to do in response?
Officer must de-escalate.
And would you agree that running away is de-escalating?
Could you please,
Would you agree that someone running away from the officer is de-escalating?
Through the video, I would agree that that would be de-escalating.
And I believe you testified on cross-examination that you didn't see anything unusual about the location of the watch in the monitor. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
That would be completely consistent with them having the watch and it pulled off out of his hand if it was all in one hand.
Either that or stuffed in his hat.
Now, would you agree that a taser and drive stun depends upon proximity, closeness?
Correct, sir.
And were you aware that Officer Slager had told Lieutenant Bowman that he had ejected all cartridges from his taser at the time that Mr. Scott allegedly took it from?
I do not recall that statement, no, sir.
Assuming that that was true, then that taser could only be operated in Galveston.
Yes, sir. If that was true, drive stun only.
So somebody being wrapped up in wires, whether it be Officer Slager, whether it be Mr. Scott, would really make no difference at that point, correct?
Not necessarily,
If there
sir.
was no taser in the car, no cartridge on the taser.
If he was drive stunned in the general proximity of the wires would transmit the current.
So if he drive stunned right on the wires, correct?
Well, if he got within the wires, that could be transmitted through the wires. Because
If the wire is still connected to the cartridge.
if the taser made contact with the wires.
Okay, so in other words, you would have to be drive stunned directly on the wire. before
Yes, sir.
That would do.
That could transmit the current, yes, sir.
And if the cartridge was attached to Mr. Scott by a bar, would that explain why a cartridge would end up over there where Mr. Scott's body was?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Further cross-examination.
Have you ever known, 19 years in law enforcement, is that correct?
A little over 19 years, yes, sir.
You're familiar with the studies of why people run from vehicle stops?
Yes, sir. I've heard of it.
People ever run because they're a great place out?
No, sir.
People run for whatever reasons they run. But not because they're great places. Correct?
Yes, sir.
The prosecutor keeps saying when Mr. Scott ran, he couples that with the expression ran away. Had Mr. Scott been frisked that morning? Had he been frisked that morning?
I have no knowledge of that, sir.
And what would a reason to frisk somebody be? Why do police officers frisk people?
Check for weapons.
And if Mr. Scott had not been frisked that morning, was there any way that Mr. Slager would have known that Mr. Scott was not on?
If he had not frisked him, no, sir. He would not.
And so when somebody who doesn't act in compliance with level 1 and level 2 and level 3 and level 4, would one who's a police officer assume that he wasn't running to get into a tactical advantage behind a tree or in some other way, in some other area to effect a lethal response towards that officer.
Would you mind rephrasing, please?
Yes, you're aware of the different levels, the continuum of force.
Correct, sir.
used, and, the non-compliance with any of those levels of force. You're aware of that?
Yes, sir.
And you are, or you may not be aware that Mr. Scott was not frisked that morning. But you are aware that he was not in compliance at any time during the various stages on the continuum of force.
Yes, sir.
Police officers don't have the time to reflect and think about possibilities in a situation like that, do they?
No, sir, they don't.
And it's only important what the police officer on the scene who has been engaged with that suspect, who has seen the reaction of that suspect to the continuum of force, that can make a reasoned decision on what the suspect is doing, whether or not to vacate the fight, whether or not to seek refuge behind a tree and to reach in their clothing or about themselves and obtain a firearm to shoot a police officer. Is that correct?
I'm still not understanding. I mean,
Is
you're
there
going,
any-
just,
Is there any way for a police officer to read the mind of a suspect?
no, sir.
But you can assume, based on the decisions made by the suspect up to that point, you can make assumptions, legitimate assumptions, of what the suspect is doing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. You have to be,
And there wasn't any indication by physical, hands up, don't shoot, I've had it, I've had enough. There's nothing that you've heard on the video of Mr. Santana or any other video that there was any verbal or physical indication of surrender by Mr. Scott that morning. Is that correct?
that is correct, sir.
And in the mind of the police officer who knew that there was a passenger in the vehicle, he didn't know his whereabouts at that time.
No, sir.
And he didn't know who was talking on the telephone, given the location where he was at that time.
No, sir.
And he didn't know whether or not Mr. Scott, we all sit back 18 months later and call him an unarmed man, but there was no way of knowing
That's correct, sir.
that Mr. Scott was unarmed at that point.
That's correct, sir.
And the only rational reason for his irrational behavior that morning, when he didn't comply to the uniform or to the instructions or to the taser, that he had something else to offer, such as a lethal weapon. Isn't that correct?
That calls for a police action.
Objection sustained.
Now, you have given your opinion to the same prosecutor that doesn't want you to answer that question.
Improper counsel.
That
Counsel, improper comment, pose questions.
your response to the prosecutor's question about your opinion of training did not consider the escalation of force by the suspect or what the next step might have been by that suspect, did it? When you gave that answer to the prosecutor, you weren't in the fight itself. You weren't in that position. You weren't there with the nanoseconds of escalation to say that there should have been some de-escalation.
That's correct, sir. I wasn't there at the time of the shooting.
And there was nothing that was done by Mr. Scott that morning to give any indication of de-escalation, was there?
I would have to say no.
And when you're in that situation, when the police officer is out on the street under that condition, it's a stressful situation, is it not?
That is correct, sir. Very stressful.
And are you aware that Mr. Slager had been under that same exact situation at 3 o'clock in the morning with a foot chase and a fight on the ground and an attempt of that suspect in that incident to take the taser away from him? Were you aware of that?
On the same day?
No, sir.
Oh, a previous incident?
Previously.
Oh, I was aware that he was in a situation, didn't have all the details.
And he didn't use his lethal weapon that day, did he?
No, sir, he did not.
Your Honor, this assumes facts that are not.
The objection sustained.
Answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
This witness questions, you may move, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We'll take a break. Please do not discuss the case. Take about 10 minutes.